In the heart of a quiet suburban neighborhood lies a tightly knit community governed by a homeowners association, or HOA. The HOA was established to maintain the charm and value of the area, but over time, it evolved into something that many residents found stifling. The rules were extensive, covering everything from lawn maintenance to the color of house siding. While these regulations aimed to uphold aesthetic standards, they often led to conflict and tension among neighbors. In this community, the HOA wielded significant power, enforcing its rules with an iron fist. Meetings were held monthly, where residents could voice concerns but often left feeling unheard or marginalized. The HOA board was made up of self-appointed enforcers who took their roles very seriously, sometimes to the detriment of neighborly relations. This culture created an environment where some individuals felt emboldened to exert control over others, leading to a sense of unease. For many families in the neighborhood, including my own, the HOA's presence was a double-edged sword. On one hand, we appreciated the efforts to keep our streets clean and appealing. On the other hand, the rigid enforcement often felt like an intrusion into our personal lives. My family consisted of myself, a proud U.S. Navy SEAL veteran, and my son, who faced challenges due to his disabilities. Navigating life in this community was already complex for us, as we sought understanding and acceptance from our neighbors. It wasn't long before I noticed that some residents began to adopt an us versus them mentality when it came to the HOA rules. Those who followed every guideline became the favored few, while others struggled under the weight of scrutiny for even minor infractions. My son's unique needs made him vulnerable in this environment. He simply wanted to enjoy playing outside like any other child his age. As tensions simmered beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic community, it became clear that something was destined to unfold. A confrontation that would challenge not only my role as a father, but also my identity as a veteran and protector. The stage was set for an encounter that would expose the darker side of HOA culture and ignite a fierce battle for dignity and respect within our neighborhood. As a U.S. Navy SEAL veteran, I've faced challenges that would make most people shudder. The rigorous training, the missions in hostile territories, and the sacrifices made for my country shaped me into a person of resilience and discipline. Service taught me the importance of loyalty, honor, and standing up for what is right. Yet, nothing prepared me for the emotional trials of raising a disabled son in a world that often struggles to understand differences. My son, Ethan, is an incredible kid with a heart full of kindness and an imagination that knows no bounds. He faces daily hurdles due to his disabilities, which range from physical challenges to difficulties in communication. However, his spirit shines bright, whether he's enthusiastically sharing stories about superheroes or finding joy in the smallest moments of life. Our bond is unbreakable. I am both his father and his protector. Together, we navigate the complexities of his condition with love and patience. Raising Ethan has taught me more about strength than any military operation ever could. Every day presents new obstacles, social interactions that can be overwhelming for him, physical activities that require extra effort, and even simple outings that sometimes become daunting. I've learned to adapt my expectations and become a stronger advocate for him, ensuring he receives the support he deserves from our community. While I've made sacrifices for my country, it's this journey as a father that has truly tested my resolve. I strive to teach Ethan about the power of perseverance and the importance of compassion. I want him to understand that even when people don't see things the way we do, it doesn't lessen our worth or our right to be treated with respect. However, navigating life in a neighborhood governed by an overbearing HOA presents its own set of challenges. The same values I learned in the military, teamwork, accountability, and leadership, are crucial as I stand up for my son against those who may not recognize his value or worthiness of kindness. In this community filled with rules and regulations, I find myself ready to defend not just Ethan but also our right to belong without fear of judgment or discrimination. Little did they know that behind my calm demeanor lies a warrior willing to fight for justice when it matters most. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon when the incident unfolded, a day that began with the promise of family time and laughter. Ethan and I had ventured outside to enjoy the sunshine, armed with a soccer ball and a desire to play. He loved being outdoors, and I cherished those moments where we could bond without distractions. But little did I know, the tranquility of that day would soon be shattered. As Ethan kicked the ball around in our front yard, his laughter echoed through the neighborhood. It was a sound that should have brought smiles and warmth, yet instead attracted the attention of Karen, a self-appointed enforcer of HOA rules. She lived a few houses down and had made it her mission to uphold the community's standards, often at the expense of kindness and understanding. Karen approached with her usual air of authority, her expression stern as she surveyed our front yard. Without any preamble, she barked at Ethan to stop playing because he was disturbing the peace. The tone of her voice was harsh, and her words cut through the joy of the moment like a knife. As she continued to berate him for simply being a child, I watched my son's face fall, confusion and hurt replacing his earlier exuberance. Ethan tried to respond, stammering an explanation about wanting to play soccer. But his words faltered under Karen's relentless criticism, which escalated into insults about his abilities. She labeled him a nuisance and suggested that perhaps he should stay inside where he belonged. Each comment felt like a punch to my gut as I witnessed the emotional toll it was taking on my child. His eyes filled with tears while he struggled to comprehend why someone would treat him so cruelly. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming surge of protectiveness mixed with anger. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was an attack on my son's spirit. I could see him shrinking under Karen's vitriol, retreating into himself as she continued her tirade. The laughter that once filled our yard faded into silence, replaced by a heavy atmosphere of tension. The incident left Ethan visibly shaken, his confidence bruised. It was heartbreaking to see my vibrant boy confronted by such intolerance. I knew then that this wasn't just about soccer. It was about respect, dignity, and standing up against bullying, especially when it came from someone who should have known better. Little did Karen know that beneath my calm exterior lay a father ready to fight fiercely for his son's right to be seen and valued in this community. Karen's behavior was emblematic of a broader issue within the HOA, an unchecked sense of authority that often morphed into a disdain for those who didn't conform to her rigid expectations. To her, the HOA rules were not just guidelines, they were commandments. This perspective fueled her condescending attitude and created an environment where empathy took a backseat to compliance. Her motivations seemed rooted in a desire for control. In her eyes, the HOA represented a bastion of order in a world she perceived as chaotic. Karen relished the power she wielded, relishing her title as a self-appointed guardian of the community's standards. She thrived on the idea that she was keeping the neighborhood in line, often at the expense of compassion and understanding. For her, enforcing rules became almost a personal crusade, one that left little room for nuance or individual circumstances. During the confrontation with Ethan, this mentality became painfully evident. As she berated my son for merely enjoying his childhood, I saw a complete lack of empathy in her expression. It was as if she viewed him not as a child deserving of kindness but as a problem to be eliminated. Her words dripped with condescension, dismissing his struggles and reducing him to a mere nuisance in her quest for order. Karen's selective perception allowed her to ignore the challenges faced by families like mine. Rather than seeking to understand Ethan's disabilities and advocating for inclusiveness, she chose to label him as difficult. This attitude reflected a broader societal issue, an unwillingness to embrace differences and foster acceptance. In her mind, following the rules meant ignoring individuality and compassion. The irony of it all was that while she sought to create an environment of conformity, she ultimately sowed discord among residents. Her approach alienated those who didn't fit neatly into her mold, pushing away families like mine who longed for acceptance and understanding. As I watched this unfold, it became clear that Karen's actions were not just about enforcing HOA guidelines. They were a personal reflection of her own insecurities and need for validation through authority. With each encounter, it became increasingly evident that confronting Karen would require more than just standing up for my son. It would involve challenging an entire mindset that prioritized superiority over humanity, a battle I was prepared to fight for Ethan's sake and for our community's future. As I stood there, watching Karen tear into my son, a storm of emotions surged through me. Anger boiled beneath the surface, fierce and unyielding. It was a reaction that I thought I had grown accustomed to after years of military service, where I learned to control my emotions and respond with discipline. But this was different. This was my child, my flesh and blood, being bullied by someone who wielded her power without a shred of empathy. Protectiveness surged through me like adrenaline. The instinct to defend Ethan kicked in, fueled by a primal urge to shield him from harm. I could see the hurt in his eyes, the way he shrank back under the weight of Karen's harsh words. It felt like a personal attack on everything I had worked to instill in him, the values of resilience, kindness, and dignity. My heart ached for him. He didn't deserve to be treated this way. Yet, as a veteran, I wrestled with the need to respond. Years of training taught me the importance of measured reactions and maintaining composure in high-pressure situations. I had faced threats in combat, but this felt like an entirely different battlefield, one where emotional stakes were just as high as any mission I had undertaken. I knew that acting out in anger wouldn't help Ethan. It could escalate the situation further and potentially harm his sense of safety in our community. I took a deep breath, attempting to channel my military training into a strategy for confrontation. Instead of rushing in with fists clenched and words laced with fury, I focused on how best to assert my role as Ethan's protector while remaining calm and collected. In that moment, I realized that this was not just about standing up against Karen. It was about showing Ethan how to advocate for himself in the face of adversity. I approached with measured steps, keeping my voice steady despite the fury within. My goal was to confront Karen not only on her actions but also to model for Ethan how to handle conflict with dignity and resolve. This would be a teaching moment, one where he could learn that standing up for oneself doesn't always require aggression. Sometimes it demands courage and clarity. As I prepared for our confrontation, I vowed to myself that no matter what happened next, I would ensure Ethan understood that he was worthy of respect and love, a lesson far more important than any HOA rule ever could be. After the confrontation with Karen, I knew that addressing her behavior wouldn't be a solitary battle. It was clear that her actions were part of a larger pattern within the HOA, one that had affected not just my family but others in the community as well. I decided it was time to gather allies and create a coalition of residents willing to stand against the pervasive negativity that Karen and her followers perpetuated. I began by reaching out to neighbors I had previously spoken with, those who had expressed their frustrations about the HOA's stringent rules and the way certain members enforced them. I organized an informal gathering at our local park, inviting them over for coffee and conversation. My goal was to create a safe space where we could share our experiences without fear of judgment or retribution. As we sat in the shade, sipping coffee and exchanging stories, it became evident that many shared similar grievances. There was Susan, whose son had faced ridicule for his artistic expression, Tom, who had been fined for minor lawn discrepancies, and even families who felt pressure from Karen to conform to her vision of what the community should be. Each story added layers to our collective frustration, revealing a pattern of bullying disguised as adherence to HOA rules. The more we spoke, the more our shared experiences galvanized us. We discussed actionable steps we could take together, writing letters to the HOA board, attending meetings as a united front, and speaking out against Karen's condescending behavior. I encouraged everyone to channel their feelings into a positive movement rather than simply reacting with anger. We needed to demonstrate that we were not just victims but active participants in shaping our community. I also emphasized the importance of empathy and understanding in our approach. While confronting Karen was necessary, it was equally crucial not to descend into hostility ourselves. We needed to set an example of how to advocate for ourselves and our children while fostering an environment of respect and inclusivity. By the end of our gathering, a sense of camaraderie filled the air. We left with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to take action against Karen's behavior together. This coalition wasn't just about standing up against one individual. It was about transforming our community into a place where every resident, especially children like Ethan, could feel safe and valued. With newfound determination coursing through us, we prepared for the next chapter in this ongoing battle. A battle not just for justice but for compassion within our neighborhood. Together, we would ensure that no child would have to endure what Ethan had faced that day. The day had finally come for me to confront Karen about her abusive behavior toward Ethan. Armed with the support of my neighbors and a resolve forged from years of military training, I felt prepared to address the situation head-on. I had spoken to my allies, and together we decided it was time to hold her accountable for her actions. Not just for Ethan's sake, but for the welfare of the entire community. I approached her house, my heart pounding in my chest. The sun hung high in the sky, casting long shadows across the street as I knocked on her door. When Karen answered, surprise flickered across her face, quickly replaced by an air of defensive arrogance. She likely didn't expect me to come looking for a confrontation, but I stood tall, drawing on the confidence and poise instilled in me through years of service. Karen, I began, keeping my voice steady and firm. We need to talk about what happened with Ethan. Her expression hardened, and I could sense her walls go up immediately. She likely anticipated me to launch into an emotional tirade, but instead, I presented my case with clarity and purpose. I recounted the incident in precise detail, her harsh words, her lack of empathy, and the impact it had on my son. As I spoke, I maintained eye contact, unwavering. This wasn't just a personal issue. It was a matter of principle. I reminded her that as members of this community, we should be fostering an environment of support and kindness rather than hostility. Karen's response was defensive yet predictable. She attempted to downplay her actions, insisting that she was simply trying to maintain order within the neighborhood. But I pressed on, challenging her narrative with facts and the experiences shared by other residents who felt similarly targeted. The tension in the air was palpable. It felt as if we were two opposing soldiers on a battlefield, each unwilling to back down. As our exchange escalated, I could see frustration brewing behind her eyes. She resorted to belittling my concerns, accusing me of being overly sensitive and exaggerating the situation. However, drawing from my military background taught me the value of remaining calm under pressure. I refused to let her condescension sway my resolve. At that moment, I made sure she understood that this wasn't just about one incident. It was about fostering a culture of respect within our community. What you did was unacceptable, I stated firmly. And as long as I'm here, I won't stand by while you treat anyone, especially children, like that. In that tension-filled confrontation, it became clear that this battle would not be easily won. Yet I remained resolute. Armed with my principles and supported by a community ready for change, I knew we were beginning to shift the tide against Karen's reign of intimidation. In the aftermath of my confrontation with Karen, the air in our community felt charged with a palpable tension. News of our exchange spread quickly, as neighbors began to talk amongst themselves, sharing their own experiences and frustrations with the HOA's iron-fisted rule. While some residents were initially hesitant to take sides, it soon became clear that many felt a sense of relief that someone had finally stood up to Karen. The reactions varied widely. Some residents expressed their support for my actions, sharing stories of their own brushes with Karen's condescension and control. They thanked me for giving them a voice and for addressing an issue that had lingered unchallenged for far too long. This newfound solidarity sparked conversations about creating a more inclusive and compassionate community. It was as if a light had been turned on, illuminating the cracks in our neighborhood's facade. However, not everyone was happy with my approach. The HOA board convened shortly after the confrontation, eager to discuss the growing discontent among residents. Karen, feeling cornered, painted herself as a misunderstood guardian of community standards rather than the bully she had revealed herself to be. She attempted to rally her supporters within the board, framing my actions as an attack on the very structure that kept our neighborhood orderly. Despite her efforts, it became increasingly difficult for her to maintain her narrative. Many residents who had previously remained silent began to voice their concerns at HOA meetings, emboldened by the shift in dynamics. They spoke about the importance of empathy and understanding in our community, illustrating how Karen's behavior contradicted those values. The tide was turning. People were no longer afraid to challenge her authority. As discussions unfolded, I noticed a subtle but significant change in the atmosphere during HOA meetings. Where once there was an air of fear and compliance, now there was open dialogue, a willingness to address grievances instead of sweeping them under the rug. Residents started advocating for reforms that would promote inclusiveness and kindness, urging the board to consider policies supporting families like mine. In this shifting landscape, I realized that confronting Karen had not only been about defending Ethan but also about igniting a movement for positive change within our community. The fallout from that confrontation created ripples of empowerment and solidarity that would reverberate long after our initial clash. It was clear that we were no longer just individuals living next to one another. We were becoming a community united by shared values and a commitment to fostering an environment where everyone, especially our children, could thrive without fear or prejudice. After the confrontation with Karen and witnessing the community dynamics shift, I felt a profound sense of responsibility to advocate for disabled residents within our HOA. What had started as a personal battle for my son's dignity transformed into a broader mission, one aimed at promoting awareness, understanding, and respect for all individuals with disabilities. I realized that many residents might not fully understand the challenges faced by families like mine, and it was essential to bridge that gap. To do this, I organized a series of community workshops focused on disability awareness. These gatherings provided a platform for education, where residents could learn about various disabilities, including the social and emotional impacts they can have on children and their families. I invited local experts, including educators and therapists, to share their insights and experiences, fostering an environment of understanding rather than judgment. As I spoke about Ethan's experiences, I emphasized the importance of empathy. I shared stories of his resilience and creativity, illustrating how he navigated the world differently yet beautifully. The more people learned about the realities of living with disabilities, the more they began to see Ethan, and others like him, as individuals deserving of compassion and inclusion rather than as burdens or nuisances. In addition to workshops, I proposed changes to HOA policies that would better support families with disabled members. This included advocating for accessible public spaces within our community, such as parks with sensory-friendly equipment and wider sidewalks for easier mobility. My fellow residents gradually recognized that inclusivity could enhance the quality of life for everyone in our neighborhood, regardless of ability. I also worked to establish a support network within the community. This group was designed to connect families facing similar challenges, offering them a space to share resources, advice, and encouragement. Together, we began to foster a culture of acceptance where differences were celebrated rather than stigmatized. As my advocacy efforts gained momentum, I noticed a change in how residents interacted with Ethan. Children began approaching him to play instead of shying away out of fear or misunderstanding. Parents reached out to me with questions about how they could better support their own children's friendships with kids who had disabilities. Through these initiatives, we were not only advocating for Ethan but for an enriched community where respect and understanding prevailed over ignorance and judgment. It became clear that every effort we made towards creating an inclusive environment was paving the way for a brighter future, not just for disabled residents but for everyone who called our neighborhood home. Reflecting on the events that transpired since that fateful confrontation with Karen, I find myself filled with a profound sense of growth and gratitude. What began as an urgent defense of my son, Ethan, evolved into a transformative journey for both my family and our entire community. The experience taught me valuable lessons about resilience, the importance of advocacy, and the power of solidarity. Standing up to Karen was not just about confronting one individual. It became a catalyst for change that rippled through our neighborhood. The support I received from other residents showed me that there is strength in unity. Together, we challenged the status quo and dismantled the culture of fear that had long permeated our HOA. We transformed frustration into action, and in doing so, we created an environment where kindness and understanding could flourish. Through our advocacy efforts, I witnessed firsthand how education can break down barriers. The workshops we organized opened eyes and hearts, allowing neighbors to see beyond their preconceived notions about disabilities. It was heartening to observe families come together, fostering friendships that transcended differences. Children who once hesitated to engage with Ethan now included him in their games, igniting joy not only for him but for all involved. As I reflect on my military background, I realize how much it informed my approach to this challenge. The principles of discipline, strategic planning, and unwavering resolve guided me in standing against bullying and injustice. Yet, it was also the emotional strength I gained as a father that drove me to fight for change. I learned that vulnerability carries its own kind of power, the power to connect, inspire, and uplift others. This journey has underscored the importance of speaking out against injustice, no matter how daunting it may seem. Each voice matters. Each story shared has the potential to ignite change. By advocating for Ethan and all disabled residents, we have not only fought against one woman's cruelty but have paved the way for a more compassionate community. Looking ahead, I am filled with hope. The changes we initiated are just the beginning. They serve as a foundation for a neighborhood where every child can thrive without fear of discrimination or ridicule. As a parent and a veteran, I am proud of what we have accomplished together. In this ongoing journey for justice and empathy, I am reminded that standing up for what is right is not just an act of courage. It is a profound commitment to ensuring that everyone, especially our children, can live freely, fully, and authentically in a world that celebrates their uniqueness.